Salam and greetings of peace. My name is Nazish and I welcome you all to our event, Underconsumption Core, Rethinking Consumption Through an Islamic Lens. Joining us today is our guest speaker, Mona Bennani from Morocco. She has an MS in Environmental Peace Building from New York University and a Permaculture Design certification from Zaytuna College in Berkeley, California. Mona has worked with the Ardh and Wilderness Institute as a sustainability educator and with the United Nations Peacebuilding Support Office on a global study of youth agency, and as a water security consultant for EcoPeace Middle East in the Kurdistan region of Iraq. She's a mama of two and currently lives in Morocco. Mona strives to honor her role as Khalifa, inheritor of a tradition that teaches us how to fulfill the covenant, the trust, as a sacred responsibility. Our moderator today is Huda Al-Sadawi, who's the Director of Research and Communications with Muslim Climate Watch. So let's jump into the conversation. Bismillah.
Bought something from the market, and he asked him, "What did you buy?" And Jabir said, "Oh, I bought meat. I was craving it, and I wanted to eat it, so I bought it." And Umar ibn al-Khattab said something which I find so profound, and he said, "أَفَكُلَّمَا اشْتَهَيْتَ اشْتَرَيْتَ." It means is that every time you crave or desire something, you purchase it. And for me, that's just like a reflection of just because we can doesn't mean we should, because meat is a very labor intensive resource. So understanding access and equality is important in this discipline. And it's also a practice of disciplining ourselves and appreciating the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. And I want to just start the talk with this because it's kind of like very antidotal to what we see in our culture of following our desires and purchasing just because we want. So I hope this opens up the floor to Mona's presentation. Bismillah.
Okay, Bismillah. I'm going to try to share my screen first.
Mona, you're muted, but we can see the screen.
Yeah, Hattie was helping me set this up. Okay, so you can see my screen correctly, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Thank you, Huda and Najish, for inviting me to speak about this. Let's just go into it. So, underconsumption core is this exciting trend that I didn't even know was on the internet until Huda told me about it, because my feed is all genocide. But it's exciting to see that this is happening at the same time. It is a really great thing. It's the whole hashtag, and I watched a few of the TikToks. Oh, sorry. It's about making use of what you already own and not buying into every trend that you see on social media, partly to combat this distorted perception of what normal consumption is seen to be with all our media consumption. Yeah. Because we live within a paradigm that says this is success. I just got this off of Pinterest, somebody's vision board, and I think a lot of people's vision boards, unfortunately, I just take a look at it. It's kind of it showcases what overconsumption is, because once you have a car, once you have a big house, once you have all these shiny things, you need other things to go along with it. And these things cost a lot of money, and you have to work really hard to get that money. And it's just this cycle and this paradigm that's really what's caused a lot of destruction right now. And when you juxtapose that to what success is in Islam, you see that yes, Allah made these things desirable for us, but he's telling us if we struggle in this life, we'll get it in Jannah. And that's just the lower level of Jannah. But what we're actually striving for, and what real true success is with Allah, is his Ridha. And that we also will feel that in this life is contentment and happiness in servitude to Allah. And when everything in Islam kind of points you back to, tries to realign you to what success is. For those of us who live or lived in the West, it's so imperative that we stick by these principles in Islam, because we're constantly bombarded with a different paradigm. We are literally entrenched in a capitalist society. And everything in Islam tells us that success is something very different. When you have the call to prayer, it's calling you to success. Like that's literally what it says when in the Adhan is come to success is prayer. One of the major tenets of Islam is Hajj. And I can tell you, as somebody who went to Hajj, that it is so important. And I'm so grateful that Allah made it an obligation for us, because it is a major realignment of our worldview, of our life, it's a physical, emotional, spiritual journey that brings us back to our center, to what's important, and to that feeling of what really matters. And it's also a trial run of the Day of Judgment, which we need to believe with our full heart that is going to happen, because it guides our every action. And there's an instance, a story I guess I want to share about this is when I finished Hajj and I was coming back home. And Hajj, like it's physical, it's hard, it's like sensory deprivation. You're in a tent, you don't have, you really truly, I mean, if you don't have the luxury package, although a lot of people are on cardboard, they didn't bring food with them, like you just rely on the generosity of your neighbors. And there's these rites that you perform that are very physically trying, and they each have a spiritual element to it. And you're surrounded by Muslimin, millions of them, and it's just like, you just want to stay there. And subhanAllah, when I was coming from leaving Hajj to go back home to board the airplane, I was in the airport and I was going on an escalator, and the first thing I saw when I looked up was this humongous television. And this television, like one of the biggest televisions I've ever seen in my life, tells you about Jeddah and Saudi. Anyways, this television had a ad for a perfume, and we're all Hajjis going back home, and it's this big ad for a perfume. And I was so angry. I was like, how unfortunate is it that some humans decided to use Allah's gifts of minerals to construct this huge TV and then power it with millions-year-old decomposed ancient plants, aka fossil fuels, and try to spark the ego that I just went through an insane spiritual journey to regain control over, so that they can make money. Like how unfortunate is that? That's some people. Like, we have come to that point as a society that we're using Allah's gifts for that. We have so forgotten who we are and what our mission is. And I just was like shouting in myself as I looked down, like, how dare you? I am on a sacred mission here. I am I have an amana, I have a covenant with my creator, I'm going to meet him, and you cannot be distracting me or using resources in this way. Like, shame on you, subhanAllah. So if I was to add any commentary to the unconsumption core discussion for Muslims, it would be that we need to know our why. And for a lot of people, is this just a trend is that we're hopping on, or is this who we are? And unfortunately, for too many, the answer is to save the earth. And for Muslims, that we know that misses the point. It's not about saving the earth for the earth's sake. It's about realigning our actions with our purpose. And our purpose is to be Khulafa on earth. What's going on with the earth is just a symptom. It's a warning sign that our actions are not aligned with our purpose, that we're living in a paradigm that says success is a high-paying job that gets you an urban middle-class lifestyle, while the definition of success with our creator is chosen servitude to him, fulfilling the function that he created us for. So we do what we do because we're khulafa, because that's what we were made to be. And in Islam, Huda, you'll probably remember this from the next 3 slides are resources that I got from Ramis Kent during the permaculture class that we took with him. He has resources online. I really highly recommend you look him up. But we are told in Islam through Allah that everything is created with a purpose. Every creature, every plant, every animal, every rock, the water, minerals, everything is worshiping Allah through its servitude of him in fulfilling its purpose. And that's what creates this harmonious biosphere that we live in. And we too are created with purpose and have a role in this biosphere, in this ecosystem, or in the several ecosystems that we live in. And it's threefold. I wouldn't say that these are 1, 2, 3, it's just like kind of numbered, but it's to worship, and that means obeying the commandments and prohibitions that Allah sent us through the multitude of guidance that he sent down through the books and through the messengers and through the companions. And through that servitude, we will be able to control and reign our nafs and use it for the good that it's meant to. And thus mastering our nafs will be able to fulfill the role he gave us as khulafa, that has this sacred covenant that we took from Allah, that we said, yes, we will take, we will be the caretakers of the earth. We will take the earth that you created and hold it as an amana and make it better and cultivate it as our test. Sorry, one second. How do I? And that's the test of our life, is, are we going to fulfill this amana and be khulafa and step into our role within this ecosystem, or are we going to completely misuse this amana and these gifts that Allah gave us? And our actions show up, which is what this verse is saying. This quote, I love it so much because it tells us that within all of us, we have a fitra already that recognizes that our job is to put everything in the right place, which is what justice is, and that we need to act according to it. And that when we act thinking not just about our present, but also the future, and every single thing, not just ourselves. And this is such a huge departure from the Western paradigm, the capitalist paradigm. The Prophet paradigm is it's community-centered. The Islamic worldview is community-centered, and it puts us in a station of responsibility towards them. So when we look to the best people to look to in terms of how we should act according to this role this function are the people that lived with the Prophet ﷺ himself, and the people who lived with him. And one of the people I'm going to introduce you to is Abdullah bin Umar al-Khattab, the son of Umar ibn Khattab. There is I think it's 12 volumes. I think it's 12 volumes of these books. It's called The Beauty of the Righteous and the Ranks of the Elite. This scholar possessed the shortest chains of transmission during his time. The Hadith scholars used to say that he went 14 years without equal from the east to the west. There was no one stronger than him in memorization. I'm sorry, it was 10 volumes. And I have one of them, just one of them in English. And so I'm getting, there's a chapter on Abdullah ibn Umar, and it's so perfectly aligned with this unconsumption core in showing us what does a Muslim look like that's doing this, that's putting into practice everything in the Quran and the Sunnah. And that's Abdullah ibn Umar al-Khattab amongst many. So I'm just going to go through a series of hadiths. I know, Huda, you invited me because partially because of the lifestyle I live, and I don't think it's anywhere in comparison to Abdullah, so I wanted to showcase him first. So, oh my gosh, there's so many stories. I picked only a few, okay? SubhanAllah. So whenever Abdullah found himself, rahimahullah, found himself attached to something he owned, he immediately gave it away in charity for the pleasure of Allah. And this tells you that there's a verse in the Quran. It says, by no means will you receive the benefit of trueness to your Lord unless you spend freely out of what you love most. This is so incredibly hard for me. Actually, I just went to Fes to buy this tray because I wanted to buy it like from artisans and like high quality. And somebody just asked me for it and I said no. And I am reading this and I just think, oh, I should give it. And so inshallah, one day I will be able to master my nafs. And this is what I'm talking about. Like this jihad, the nafs is so special amongst Muslims. And it's like something we really need to strive for, and that striving is jihad, and that jihad is really important for us to be able to fully step into our role as Khalifat. Because can you imagine what that would do to the world if we gave every time somebody asked us for something? SubhanAllah. And I highlighted the part where it says for the pleasure of Allah, because that's really what we need to be focusing on when we do anything, is we need to renew our intention, because what we're seeking is Jannah and the Rida of Allah. And saving the earth is gonna just like tumble right after. It's just gonna come into play when all these other things, when we're implementing all these other guidances. The next hadith, excuse the gifs, I just thought your attention span would like go down with all the words. He was riding a horse, which he really loved, and he felt, at the moment he felt this vainess and just from the distinction and worth of the horse, he put it aside and let it rest in the stable until he could once again like take that out of him. So what does that say about the luxury items, the brand, the cars, the clothes, all these things? It's like a question to ask ourselves, is it gonna cause this in us? There's a similar one, I didn't put it, okay, you'll see it later. But that's a question we can ask ourselves in trying to implement. Is it going to incite these feelings in us? If not, then that's not in line with our purpose. That's not in line with our role as Khalifat. Is we need to once again rein in that the nafs, do jihad nafs, and not get these things or put them aside until they don't have that effect on us. And when talking about consumption, we can talk about consumption of all things, including food. Abdullah bin Umar rahimahullah would subsist on food other than meat for a long stretch of time, very similar to the hadith that Huda shared at the beginning. once again, jihad an-nafs. There were so many hadiths very, very similar to this one, where like a very characteristic character of Abdullah ibn Umar is that he never ate a meal without inviting somebody. And that somebody wasn't like his friend. It was orphans, it was the needy, it was the people that his neighbors. It was he would never eat a meal without them, subhanAllah. So when we talk about like mutual aid and community work, how much more personal can this get? How it's not like an organization thing. That's how we change. It's an inside inner work. I'm inviting people to my table in my home. And are we, and then on another point, are we always fulfilling our desire? And that's not just for clothes and things and like home decor and makeup and stuff like that, but our actual needs. Are we taking our full, or are we leaving a little bit? He's telling us that it's more important to share than even to take as much as we need. SubhanAllah. This one's another one, SubhanAllah, and he SubhanAllah. So it's the same, similar hadith. In this hadith, he's talking about a verse where the merchants in Medina used to cheat people a lot. And so if somebody was due something for labor, they would give them less than they were due. And that just thinking about that made Abdullah ibn Umar cry, like bawl until he was exhausted, subhanAllah, with the fear of that. So as Muslims, when we're doing business deals or when we're thinking of creating industries and institutions, are we giving, once again, the haqq that we know others deserve, and that others don't have to just be humans, they're also animals, they're also like water. Are we damming rivers just because, or are we cheating the animals from their water and other communities down the river from their water? It really it's really a tafsir on a lot of things, but the fact that had such a huge impact on him, that he was crying from it, tells us the state that our heart needs to be in, and how much Muslims need to remember and read the Quran so that we can remember this guidance and change our paradigm. I think that's just as important in terms of this underconsumption core, is reading the Quran and reminding ourselves of it as the things that we do, because an aligned heart will lead to aligned actions. This one, because of his status as the son of Umar al-Khattab, who was the Khalifa, he used to receive endowments and he would immediately give his endowments, such that he would, just to buy some food from his horse, he would ask for it on credit until he could make it himself. So subhanAllah, we're trying to rack up money to fulfill that vision board, and our predecessors are giving away thousands so that they have that rida with Allah. This one is in direct, it's like so direct, the underconsumption core, because his son tells him, I have a tear in my shirt and I want to buy a new one. And he says, just cut it off, mend it, and then wear it again. And his son is like, he could see that he doesn't really like that answer. And he tells his son, my son, beware of Allah and fear him. Don't be like the people who use Allah's favor to merely satisfy their hunger and to display them over their shoulders. So this is another thing that Muslims need to think about when we're purchasing or consuming, is are we doing it to satisfy this hunger, and like hunger as in like this desire to fit in some place or to look a certain way and display them over our shoulders. Like, I don't know how much more direct, subhanAllah, it can get. And this is, I feel like, because we live in a society, the society that we do, it's extremely hard to put this into practice. Because say you have to go into a business meeting, it's just the culture to not wear tattered clothes, I guess. So how do you put this into practice? And I think that when Muslims do, this is the kind of zuhd that I don't think any of us have yet, subhanAllah. This is another one about clothing where he didn't want to wear a cotton. I'm assuming he was wearing wool or some type of harsher fabric. He didn't want to wear cotton because he was afraid of developing a feeling of pride. And he was so concerned about what Allah loves that he could deny himself this softer shirt to wear, or this robe, this garment to wear. So again, another lesson from that would be if you wear it and you don't feel pride, then I guess it's okay. Another hadith from him about type of clothing when we're talking about consumption. And I really like this one because it says, which a wise and a forbearing person does not censor you with. Forbearing means somebody who's patient and restrained. So if somebody who's very patient, very restrained, like has restrained all criticism, but it's that bad that they censor you, you probably shouldn't be wearing it. Oh, this one has a GIF. I think that's why it's not showing up. But in this hadith, he had gone to the market with a friend, and he had gone through the entire market without just saying salam to people, and at the end didn't buy anything. And his friend was like, "Why did we even go?" And he said, "So we can smile and say salam to people." And so if you're forced to go to the mall, say salam, and you can get that sunnah instead. The next one is when he died, subhanAllah, once again, I told you about the endowments that he received, but he gave it away such that when he was buried, he was wearing an old izar, which I think is a lezar, which I think is a sheet. So subhanAllah, one of the most pious, noblest people, companions who lived during the time of the Prophet, like that's how he died. And it tells you that we need to be careful about our endings, and that's one of the reasons why I accepted to speak, is because I need these reminders as much as anyone. I've been falling short of my own of the things that I know that I should be practicing. And so reminding myself of the practice of our predecessors and that they stayed consistent till the end, it's very inspiring. And in terms of the Unconsumption core, it's a trend. It's a hashtag on social media. And we really need to remind ourselves that the people we want to emulate and follow in their conventions are the companions, Rahimallah anhum, and the Prophet Sallallahu, and really hold tight to that rope. And that whatever we do today, inshallah, we will see in the afterlife, inshallah. This one was really scary to me. Because he says, any comfort a servant solicits and achieves in this world will demote his standing before Allah, even if the servant is generous in sharing the benefits of his success with others, which just tells you the really high rank that the poor and the oppressed have with Allah, and how we need to do everything we can to be the supporters of them if we're in a higher socioeconomic status, because they are the people that Allah loves, and they are the ones that are going to be at a higher rank. And so we shouldn't be chasing that success vision board. We need to be chasing, how can we benefit the poor and oppressed the most? And how can we do jihad and nafs so much so that we can step into our roles that and build institutions and businesses and do truth seeking and research and art in a way that cultivates and betters the earth in a totality. And this is not the last one, but I think it should be the last one because he reminds us that even him, such an amazing, amazing person, mashallah, with such control over his nafs, with having seen so much and practicing so many amazing things, even he calls himself just an abd amidst the infinite multitudes of his creation. So he's calling himself just a servant amongst the animals, the plants. Like, that's the kind of hierarchy we have in Islam, is that we are all dependent on Allah. We are all abd to Allah. And our role is as the caretaker, but that doesn't mean we have this right to step over or use in the way that we have been using, oppressing others. And this is strange and extreme, and people will call it crazy. But that is our deen, and that's how, that's the level we hold ourselves to, not just, using leftover vegetables, which is part of it. It's definitely part of it, but it's not the shoes that we're filling. It's not, we as Muslims, we have to do the crazy things, and to get there we need a lot of training and a lot of guidance, and it behooves us to constantly remember this and remind each other. Remind each other. I think I did that twice. Yeah. And this is his last bit of advice, is to be in this world like a stranger or traveler. And if you're a traveler, you're not carrying very much. And I can tell you as a traveler right now, that even 2 luggages feels like too much, feels too heavy. And when we have a space, and it behooves us not to fill this space, but to fill the community, and to be the type of people that, if we're using our space, we're bringing people in and making the entire world better. And that's going to change the world. That will change the climate crisis. That will change environmental degradation. That will change all of these things if we step into our role and perform our function by doing jihad and nafs, by reminding ourselves of guidance, and really trying to be those crazy strangers of the world that know that we're going to the grave and will be raised up to the day of judgment. So if we're hashtagging anything, let's hashtag, this is who I am. I'm a Khalifa, I do jihad and nafs, I have an amana, and I'm striving to do Zuhd. I don't know if I'll get there. The next couple slides are things that I've done in the past that I think are like really insignificant compared to Abdullah ibn Umar Khattab. But we can talk about them if there's any questions, but I really just want to keep it right there, inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mana. I'm really glad we had this like talk, because I feel like, the whole trend of underconsumption, I felt like I really wanted to kind of have it realigned with our values and purpose as Muslims, especially during a time when we go on our feed and we see like the content of like genocide that's happening um in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Sudan, all the in our countries. And then it kind of feels like so weird seeing like content about genocide and then content about mindless consumption. And then beyond the white savior um like climate um uh, uh justice kind of kind of really realign it within our values and purpose as Muslims. So I know you talked a lot about Khalifat al-Ardh. So yeah, like how do you define that? And yeah, because I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with this word.
Yes, let me go back to the slide. But I want to I guess second what you said. I didn't know how to bring it up in here exactly, but this part about the save your earth, like if this is your why is if your why is save the earth, then you're gonna come up with solutions like national parks instead of honoring treaty rights of the indigenous people, of Green New Deals instead of ending the military industrial complex, of like electric cars that are only exacerbating or continuing uh, insurrection in African
Mhm.
countries. These are like they're good, but they're not what a Khalifa would do. Like a Khalifa would take into totality the rights of everything,
Mhm.
and and I think it's present and future,
Yeah, it's fun
and maximum possible benefit.
when you shared this, I it made me think of the indigenous principles of 7 generations, which um started like a green cleaning company. It's called 7 Generations, but it's um based on the indigenous principles that any decision that is made, they think about the impacts 7 generations into the future and think about even the past 7 generations.
So
And it's kind of like relating to that, like what do you think are actionable steps? I know you talked a lot about, realigning our values and purpose, but for our audience, what do you think? What are some things they can start today to be mindful, to practice Zuhd and fulfill their roles as Khalifa, inshallah?
I think it's very it's very local, because and it's very local, and it's also such a Western paradigm problem, which is why we come back to the paradigm, because so many people, and I almost venture to say the majority of people, already live as khulafa in their communities. So many people still live in rural areas. So many people still hold their indigenous practices the way that they are able to fulfill the rights of the ecosystem that they're part of, and also care for their own communities. It's just what we see and what we read about depends on our language, depends on where we're living, and it's really our problem. And I feel like it's a siloed problem. I I went to the mountains in Morocco, and there are still people who there's like half, at least half, if not more, in Morocco still take donkeys on a 2-hour journey to get water
Mhm.
for just subsistence living. Don't they and or they used to have rivers in which they could, but then climate change um and drought, so and they still very much live in like in communities that take care of each other, that are pretty much zero waste, that that are mutually beneficial in terms of like within their own ecosystem, they're thriving, and the only thing that's harming them is other people, other companies, other industries, other governments coming in and ruining that. So for us who live in urban areas and are, because of globalization, are connected in this web of consumerism, I think the most important thing in terms of, there's a lot, but I think the most important example I am going to strive to really implement in my life that I'm not doing right now is the whole inviting people to a meal. There's a study that was done that you are more likely to survive a climate disaster if you know your neighbor, if you're very close to your neighbor, because your neighbor is gonna watch out for you and you'll survive together, inshallah. But that sunnah, that practice of really mutual aid between each other, I think that's one of the most important things we can do as Khulafa. And then in terms of our consumerism is going back to being aware of the other servants of Allah around us and how they're being called, like how we're being called to use them, and coming back into that consciousness. Those are two really important ways, but I think at the moment, the most important way is definitely pressuring our governments in whatever way we can, is working within the institution. I almost regret, it's not, I almost regret, it wasn't my choice to come here, but I think it's really important for people inside what we're calling the empire to fight against the empire within the empire. And that's more effective, I believe, than like just protesting in front of the embassy, is to do whatever we can, run for local elections, like do all the things that we're doing already. But political action is really, really important. Any type of action that will lift this oppression from people, not just our people, any people. Yeah.
Inshallah. Thank you for these reflections. For the sake of time, I want to open up the floor for the attendees. If they want to ask questions, you can unmute yourself and feel free to ask a question. I see that Aya has asked a question. I can read it. So how can I, as a consumer, balance modest clothing with ethical purchases? Usually when I ask someone at the mosque where they get their abaya from, it's usually always from Shein. Yes. And when I look online, it's usually influencers promoting an unhealthy amount of unethical purchases. As a Khalifa on this earth, how can we stay modest in a conventional way? That's a great question, Aya.
That is a great question. So I definitely struggle with that too. And what I've come to the conclusion is I just have to make my own clothes because, yeah. And so I'm on that journey. I haven't gotten there yet, because I want to find ethical fabric. There's just, I don't know how you find it. I am still on that journey. And at least, and now it's transferred to Morocco. So that's even harder, subhanAllah. But what I have done, and I can only speak to my experience, is just thrift stores. I don't buy anything new. I haven't bought anything new in terms of clothing. And so I just try to find things that work. And then when I'm like particularly influenced with Love Lena, because I think she's just like, mashallah, beautiful. And I love her. I love the way she dresses herself. So So that's particularly hard on me. But when I think, whenever I'm like, oh, I should just get this dress and then that's the only dress I'll ever have. I think about death. And I think about Surat Takafur. And I think about how last year I got through the year just fine on the clothes that I had. And in fact, I like can't even remember how I felt wearing them. Like that's not something I remember. And Allah will reward me. There's plenty of ways to wear modest clothing. Yeah, it doesn't have to, it's not a cookie cutter way. Even like within our cultures, there's so many ways to be modest. So yeah, I just go to thrift shops and try to like patch my way through. But subhanAllah, I like look at the example of our predecessors. They wore patched clothing, they wore old clothing. We have so many choices that are not even patched or have holes in them. So I just try to be grateful for what I have and try to make it work. And subhanAllah, we have a lot of options when it comes to secondhand clothing. So I secondhand clothing to me is like the one step less bad than buying new clothing, because compared to our predecessors, we still have way too much, way too much. Yeah.
Yeah, and I noticed this actually with influencers. It's funny you mentioned with Lovelina, because I know recently she started her own line because she wants modest clothing, but then there's absolutely no transparency as to who made the clothes, and the materials are also all polyester, plastic. And I do
Yeah.
notice that very popular within the influencer. It's like, oh, they want to promote and encourage modesty and kind of like go with the whole like women empowerment, but then at the expense of probably female workers in third world countries who are being paid less than, you know, living wage to sew those clothes.
Yeah.
And there's it's kind of like the concept of halal and tayyib with when it comes to food. It's like halal, is it tayyib? And I think it comes to like I know Muslim Climate Watch did a whole talk about ethical fashion, I believe, and we have it up on our webinar if you want to. I know Nas can contribute more, but yeah, I think like buying secondhand, if you do need to buy new, try to find like sources. It will cost more, but then if you think of it as cost per wear, fair wage living, I remember there was a company called Ana Hariri, and they are very transparent about their fair trade and like living wages space in Turkey. But before it was a lot of cotton products, now it's a lot of polyester. So that's what I can contribute. Okay. Oh yes.
So yeah, I'll just quickly jump in here. So I can link, inshallah, our talk to the where we talked about modest clothing, but also being ethical with our choices. And inshallah, like there's so in that particular talk, we spoke with two sisters who were running a beautiful clothing swaps events, you know, in their local communities. So in their local massages, they will get a bunch of sisters to come together and swap clothes. So that's also a good way to kind of, you know, make secondhand clothing, just normalizing it and being part of it, or even swapping clothes with your friends, with your sisters, with your cousins, if you're about the same, you know, size. So so that's also another way of inshallah being mindful of your purchases.
I wanted to share a quick story. So I'm on the slide. If you can see the chapstick, if I ran into the room, I could get it for you. But the story of this chapstick is I think it's 8 years ago now. I watched a video about zero waste right before I was going to go to Washington, D.C. for an internship. And I had already packed my bags, and I decided this is totally the sunnah of the Prophet. I'm gonna challenge myself to just not use plastic. So I repacked my bags, took out everything that was plastic, and then I just challenged myself to only buy things that were not plastic, packaged in plastic. And it was Ramadan, and I was fasting, and my lips were super chapped, and I was like, I've never heard of a chapstick that is not in a plastic tube. This was 8 years ago. I have like my imagination can't, I don't understand how to go that far. So I made dua, and I was like, Allah, I have super chapped lips, and I don't know what I should do about that. So I made this dua, sincere dua, and I passed by a farmer's market, and I didn't need to go to the farmer's market because I'm fasting, but I did. And there, lo and behold, is a chapstick in a paper tube. And subhanAllah, that experience of making dua and then Allah answering it in a way that I could not have imagined, just like it carried me through my entire zero waste journey. And so I always say, make a sincere dua, Allah will show you a way. If you're truly sincere, then He will either put contentment in your heart for whatever you have and you don't have, or give you an alternative, and He really is the best of planners.
Yeah, I do like the reminder to find the contentment, within our rizq and within God. Because I think, like on my own low waste journey for the past, I don't know, 8, 10 years, and mindful consumption. I feel like I realized a lot of it comes down to, yeah, the whole like, instant gratification and wanting, like it's based on your ego and you wanting you to fulfill your desires right away. I feel like it's a practice really of, at the end of the day, purifying our heart from the desires and knowing, being very mindful towards the consumption, because we're going to be asked about every dollar where we spent it, every minute where how we spent it. So we're reminding ourselves of like, our state of our hearts and being content and reflecting on what is making us want more, and where does that desire come from. Think, as someone who's also very passionate about like personal finance, I realize a lot of people like do that to fulfill like an emptiness that comes from inside the constant consumption. So to kind of go back to the state of our heart and reflect how like it's to fill a void and where that void should come from. Yeah. Yeah, I remember my grandma used to always tell me like to think about every dollar, how I spent it, to think of every minute how I spent it as well. So thank you, Meliha, for that reflection. Are there any more questions? I'm gonna be mindful of time. Any closing remarks, Mana, Nazish?
I would say boycott.
Yes.
Keep reviewing the boycott list and just remember that like none of it's worth it. You don't need it. And just both boycotting and remembering death often, that we're not going to take anything with us. And there are people who are there are thousands, millions of people who are displaced and are travelers, and we are living in comfort and truly have so much to be thankful for. So we really, even if that comes to like toilet paper and paper towels, like we don't need it. We really don't, subhanAllah. So just, I think and Islam tells us to put an intention behind everything and that we will be rewarded for it. So like, if you can put 3 intentions behind not using toilet paper, you will get rewarded 3 times for it every time you don't do it. So subhanAllah, intentions are really important, and also we are people who are conscious and who use our aql and to just use it. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mana. I noticed we have a question from Dot. I heard of a hadith that the Prophet, peace be upon him, used to boycott as well. Do you know more about this? I personally don't feel like I know to respond. Is anyone able to answer this question? No. But yeah, thank you for the reminder to boycott Muna. And yeah, I think like if anything, the whole genocide and boycotting made me realize like, yeah, I can probably live without replacing a lot of things that I didn't need before. Okay. Thank you. I'll leave it to Nazish then to wrap this up. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, both Mona and Huda, for that beautiful, beautiful and inspiring talk. I had goosebumps on so many, moments, subhanAllah. That's a beautiful book that you shared snippets from, Mona. Thank you for sharing that. I have made a note of it, and inshallah, we'll be sharing all of these resources with everyone here. Lastly, this is a difficult journey with so much going on, but I think that we should always try to bring ourselves to the realization that no matter which way, how things unfold, how we live our lives is something that is within our control. And yes, it's an enormous task in front of us. But I personally like that hadith of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam where he talked about the last hour and continuing with the planting of the sapling, right? Because that is what is in our hands and in our control. So always being reminded of that and trying our best to center ourselves with that message. And with that, I would thank you all for joining us. Please stay connected. You can find more of Muna's work at her Instagram handle is Journey of Khalifa. We can also, inshallah, share that in an email after to all the attendees. And you can follow us on social media, which is at Muslim Climate W. And inshallah, we'll see you guys again next time. All right, take care. Assalamu alaikum.